Hello there, welcome back to another series of shows. Today I'm going to be looking at Rurouni Kenshin, the series. I mean, there are quite a few of these, and I'll go through the information quickly. You've got Rurouni Kenshin Origins, then you've got Kyoto Inferno, then The Legend Ends, then later on we have Rurouni Kenshin Final, and then Rurouni Kenshin The Beginning. So there's 5 of them, they're based on a manga. They're directed by Kishi Otomo and stars Takari Sato. So hopefully I have not butchered these names too badly, but that's the information you need to know. So yeah, that's information. They are a series I'd heard of, but I hadn't really been looked into that much. It was like I've been watching other kind of kung fu martial arts movies or swordplay movies. I heard these were great. It's one of those ones I would get to later. I thought I'll get to them. I'll get them. They're in my to watch list. I just haven't got to them yet. And then as the new ones came out, they all came available on Netflix. So I started watching them and quickly became obsessed by them because they are spectacular. And there were 5 films. There's not a bad one in them. That's really good. Usually when you get to part 5, a series tends to be lacking, especially in the West. I mean, in the East, they're used to series of films like Zatoichi and stuff like that, Zatoichi. But there's been other ones where you've got the female prisoner Scorpion, that after 5, there was time to go. And there's Gangster Outlaw VIP had the same thing where there was 3 or 4 good ones and then it started to fall away. This series, even though it had a pattern, managed to avoid the problems of these other series by quietly reinventing all the time. It's always up in the stakes, but it had a interesting protagonist and it also had an interesting situation, and it always adjusted slightly and gave you more information, background information. Plus they did 3, then they stopped for a bit, then came back to another 2. So it meant like they were adapting a manga, so there was an actual story already to adapt. But also they had given still time before they actually came back and did it. So it was spaced out quite well so that the people had time to kind of re-energize themselves and come back and do some more. But this series is terrific. This series is really wonderful. So the whole idea is Batotsu the Killer is the name of the the legend, this guy who went around killing people during the war between the shogun and the emperor. And the idea was they were trying to get rid of the shoguns so the emperor could take over again. And it was a case of they wanted to retain some traditions but also deal with the West in some way. So it was it was a painful look at how to progress the country, but then allow it to actually grow in a healthy way, because the shoguns, they had all these warriors who were just used to war and that's all they had in them. They were, there were people that it was a kind of a war to establish some new stability, and everyone thought they were right. It was one of those wars that everyone thought they were right. They thought their way of doing things were going to create the peace, because one side was going to win and one side was going to lose. So Batotsu's side won, and he was one of the butchers who went around killing the shogun warriors, and it made him sick to stomach of what he could do, because he was the great warrior. He could take out anybody with his sword. He was master tactician, very fast, very skillful, very brutal. But by the end of it, he was feeling like he's a killer. He's just a brutal killer, and he just doesn't like what it did to him. He just hates what became of him because of that murdering he had to do. So when we get to the first film, he's already left that behind him. You get an early part for like 5-10 minutes, so you see the final battle of the war before peace is declared, and then you jump 10 years. In that 10 years, Batotsu, the legend of he has died away. He no longer uses that name. He wants to forget he ever was that person, and he's basically wandering around and he's trying to. He now has a new name called Hamuru Kenshin, and he's trying to forget, who he was. And now he only carries a sword. He'll try to help you, but he only carries a sword that's bleeding the inside rather than the outside. So basically, his aim is not to kill anybody. His aim is to take people down, but not kill them, and actually just say, look, I'm not killing anymore, but I will stop you if you're going to hurt these people. Because there's still a lot of tension within the different areas. So he has to be the kind of the wandering the Ronin who's trying to help the people. And you catch him when he comes to one area, and he's now been wanted because of someone who's taking the name Batotsi and who is going round as a hired killer, and he's working with some local criminals, and he's taking people out, and he's really pushing these criminals' agenda, which is to basically grow omnipowerful and in Tokyo. And this new guy, realizes that the original Batotsi's on town, so he obviously wants to prove himself by defeating the original, the great one of a legend. And the old Batotsi, he's now Kenshin, he's trying to start off avoid the conflict, and then when he realizes he can't avoid it, and he starts to run into people and helping them, and starts to be fond of them, he realizes he has to kind of make a stand. And boy, what a stand it is. Now, the thing about these films are, they have a kind of structure. The first four have a structure where we get 2/3 of the film is all the character work. And then the last third, all the amazing action. You get action in between before that to keep you going. But the last third's all action. It's totally like a James Cameron structure, where you've got good stuff, but the final third is an all action finale. It has that kind of feel to it, and it keeps going. But the thing is, even though it follows that structure a lot, it always finds ways to keep it interesting by making the character work interesting, so that he's always fighting someone new and who is a different kind of foe for him, so that you don't feel that you're going through the same motions, because you're always interested in seeing how he's going to defeat someone. Plus, the fact that he can't kill anybody makes it difficult. It makes it a dramatic challenge for him. So that's what's interesting about it. So if this first one, he's fighting against a crime lord who's selling like this new powerful opium to people. You've got a villain who's almost as good as Batotsi and who has been really brutal, and he'll tear apart police stations and everything. He is like the Terminator. And you've got this other guy who's the brother of one of his friends who's also in the family, in the crime family, and they were messed around during the war, and and his guy, he's just gone mad, and he's just crazy. And it's about how he does he defeat them. There's some great action scenes. The final third is astonishing, especially having seen it before. I've seen this series before. It comes out because there's a great sequence where him and his sidekick pal are fighting all these guys in this big field, which should be absurd, but it's just wonderful because the worse the harder the challenge is, the more inventive Kenshin gets. And then after they go inside the house, into the mansion, and there's a layer after layer of enemies to defeat. And because he's a sidekick, because one of the guys who he initially fought went to his side, and he's like a much more working class, ruffian type of fighter who's much more of a brawler. But by having him always beside Kenshin means you've got another type of fight that's always going on the side. Like he's taking out one of the side villains for Kenshin usually, but it gives the fights a different feel. It makes it have to vary up a lot, and it really gives you another feel for the film. So, but Kenshin's got a story. He's got this swordplay instructor. Her father died. You can see the picture behind me. She's the love interest for the whole series of films, but obviously because they're both kind of repressed, both kind of damaged, it takes them the entire series to really show affection. Although they've got affection, but it's show romantic affection. So that's the thing that runs through it. And it could be really cloying, but it's played so well that you don't really mind because these two are genuinely damaged by their past. And the more you find out about Kenshin's past, it's a miracle he ever got anywhere with anyone else ever again. And it becomes this thing that's an interest to you to watch these two try and get together. There's a kid as well who joins the group. There's a doctor who was helped to use to make the opium war stronger, and she's turned away. She's trying to run away, and he protects her. So they become a family, a little group to fight against these people, and that's the first one. First film about that group becoming one as they defeat these villains. You can see a group behind me there. I mean, it's a terrific group of characters and actors, and they all have a really good chemistry. So I mean, the good thing is the series is Kenshin's the lead, but the actor has other actors around him who can take some of the stress off him sometimes and actually add some good character quirks, so he's not doing all the work all the time in the film, so there's other actors who are around him. There's also a police captain who originally was an enemy, and because he fought for the shoguns, and he knows who Batoshi was, and he's a bit suspicious of him at the start, but he's always the one who had to bring Kenshin in throughout the series to help him out because he knows how good he is. And he's always got a cigarette in his mouth, and he's this wonderful, cynical character who knows things are messed up. He's been through the wars, he's been beaten down, he's been on the losing side of a big war, like the final war of a generation. But so it gives him an interesting, tired feel, which really works. Always an interesting character placed against these other characters. And he also, no matter how cynical he is, he always comes through the end for Kenshin, even though he never gets this. You always feel he doesn't like Kenshin that much, but they're on the same side usually. And so all these characters are always floating through the films. Next, you've got the two-parter, parts 2 and 3, because they do that structure. And you've got, basically, Kyoto Inferno and Legend Ends. Now, I didn't realise I was watching these were part 1 and part 2 of one longer story. I just thought it was parts just 2 and 3 of a trilogy. No, it's a 2-part story, ultimately. And it's epic. It's really epic. There's wonderful stuff. Basically, another threat has come from the remains of the old shogunate origins. There's still some warriors left who have to be taken down, and they are forming a new alliance to try and take down the emperor and bring their agenda to the fore. And you've got this guy who's been burnt alive. He's wrapped in all these just things to keep him alive. And he's a fearsome enemy, and he's terrific. And you've also got all these there's all these soldiers who are never caught. These warriors are never caught, and they're all getting brought together. And they've all different skills, so it becomes a case of these are all fighters that Kenshin has to defeat. And he has to find a way to defeat them because even though he's good, he has to find new ways and new techniques to actually defeat some of these people, because he does get his ass kicked in this film. The first film, Kyoto Inferno, he gets his ass kicked a lot. And he also has other characters emerging. So he's got all his characters from the first film that all are important in these two films as well. But he also has to go and travel to Kyoto and deal with people who he was enemies with to start with, but now they're now a common enemy against these people who are destroying the peace. And because they realise that Kenshin's actually an honourable person, they find that peace. But there's one warrior who was one of the great warriors of the shoguns. He has gone bad, and he's out to defeat Kenshin no matter what. And that's one of the good arcs of the 2 and 3 was that guy slowly coming back to the light painfully, because he has to be defeated quite a few times before he gets it, and he has to listen to other people who tell him, this fight of yours is useless. And it just shows you how useless some fights are. And it's all about that. And it becomes a story of the fight and how tired the fight is and how exhausting it is. And you find a bit more about why Kenshin changed as well. About how he killed people he shouldn't have killed, and how the guilt got to him, how he fell in love and things. So that slowly emerges throughout the series, and that it's just a slow undertone to the series, and you find more and more about Kenshin throughout the films. But the main thing is the fights here, and also the scene that the enemies see that Kenshin is in love with this woman who we introduced the first film, and that's a liability to her because it makes them weak, and then they know if they get her, they've got him under the thumb. So it's so the second film ends with an attack in Kyoto, which is amazing. Firefights, everything, and it ends up in the sea as they've kidnapped her, and he has to protect her. He has to save her, and all hell breaks loose, and he ends up washed up in an ocean and picked up by some mysterious person. And it's a really good cliffhanger because you don't know what the hell's going to happen next. The third one is called The End, which is not really the case, or The Legend Ends, because it's actually about the legend of Pubatotsi trying to make peace with it. It's not the end of the story, but it's the end of him trying to find peace with his past. It's about making peace with what you've done in your life, and it's also about other characters trying to find peace. And you find a lot of characters who, the villains, have more complex stories. There's this kid who's always laughing and smiling. You find out a tragic past of him, and it's quite a sad story. And ultimately, the kid's actually mad. And there's a kid who beats the crap out of Kenshin in one earlier in the second film. And there's lots of stuff in the second film that leads up to the third one. It showed you how dangerous these guys are. There's all these villages that have been destroyed and people have been murdered, and Kenshin goes in and takes out some of the villains who are doing it. But it's always this plague that he has to stop. And they think they've had a standoff in Kyoto, but Kyoto just to start. No, they escaped Kyoto, and the third one they're actually making the emperor and all the politicians bend to their will, and it basically needs Kenshin to come back, learn new skills, which he does from his master, and then come back and take out the enemy, then going into the big war boat, and him and his people just go there and absolutely destroy them, and have absolutely a wonderful fight. I mean, the third story is actually the most predictable one. It goes back to some of the conventions of the first one, but it doesn't matter because it's so well done, and you get a lot of crowd-pleasing thing of the warrior who you're watching the second one go bad, come back and actually fight the right people, even though he's still torn. You've got the military officer who lost the Shogunate army and now fighting against the Shogunates. And you've got all his pals and all the rest of it, and you get these fights that keep on going on, and they're always really inventive, and you finally get Kenshin get to the big boss eventually, and that's an amazing fight because it takes so many people. They have to take out the entire boat and then face off against this one guy, and this guy is absolutely brutal. It's just great. I mean, the whole thing is just wonderful, and it's almost like the story is at the end of the Batotsi legend. It's like him finally finding peace and finally facing up to what he's done and realising he actually can move on. But it's about the struggle he has, about how, why he created the sword that couldn't, it was only a bleeding inside. And it's all about his philosophy of trying to help people and how that affects these other people who he actually has his enemies with to start with, but who eventually turn to his side. And how that kind of example is what he's trying to push through no matter how many awful experiences he has. So this is just a wonderful series, and it could have ended as a great trilogy there, because the fights are astonishing. I mean, you can't do any justice to the fights, just say you have to go watch these films. The fights are stunning. But also, the drama's good as well. They actually take time in the drama. It's not the deepest drama, but they do it right. They actually invest, and it's well meant, and it's a genuine drama. They're genuinely trying to make a good film through the drama and fights. They took some time off, then come back with two films, which is Rurouni Kenshin, the final, and then the beginning, which is weird because Eric the Asian movie enthusiast said he should have done it the other way around and showed him. And I think he's right, because the final would have made more of an impact if he'd seen the beginning before that. When you get flashbacks to the beginning events in Final. Well, it kind of takes some of the energy away a little bit, but that's a minor complaint. The Final is basically about, after years of peace, after 3 or 4 years of peace, basically, a new threat arrives, a new bunch of enemies, some of whom we fought before, and they're out to take down the Emperor's army. They're the remnants of the Shogunate. There's even more left to kill, even though everyone's thought it's over. And it turns out that the leader of them is the brother-in-law of Kenshin, because his first wife died, and as the kid, the villain was a kid then, and he thought that Kenshin killed his sister when he didn't. But it was a complicated situation. He's out for revenge. It's how does he deal with revenge against Kenshin, who understands his drive, but has to stop him from causing this havoc. And it's all the characters from the last few films come in to help him, even the ones who are not particularly fond of him sometimes. And there's some characters that actually do come back. They are surprises, because you thought you as last you saw them during the trilogy. And it's terrific. I mean, it follows the same structure. First 2/3 is the action scenes, but it's really character. And the last third comes into a full-on action extravaganza. But it's nice. There's lots of like Yakuza stuff in it. There's lots of just crime story elements as well as the fights. And it's just wonderfully done. And there's nothing new in it, but it does everything exactly what it needs to do. It's just wonderful. Even though the Final is wonderful in every way, I kind of prefer the beginning. Even though, I mean, the Final has some moving stuff, you do find your sympathies with the villain. I mean, I found actually a lot of the villains in 2, 3, and 4 were wonderfully interesting characters. I think the first one had kind of weaker villains. It was almost like they're starting up, and you got kind of just like basically the guy who wanted to be Batotsi, and this other guy whose story you only found out towards the end, so you never had a chance to become a full-fledged complex villain. But in 2 and 3 and 4, they paced out a lot more, so you get a lot more of the backstory of the villains and actually find yourself interested in them. I mean, the big villain from 2 and 3 is really interesting. Some of his sidekicks are really interesting. And the villain in the fourth one is quite tragic, because it was like, it didn't need to be this way, but it's just fate just seemed to push him in the wrong direction. But the beginning, I think, is less typical of a Rurouni Kenshin film. It's a much quieter film. It's about the love story that drove him from being the killer to being the guy who protects people. Even though his instincts were always to protect people. But you see him kill the guard in the first one under orders, and then you also see him how he's brought into the Emperor's side, and how he becomes this brutal killer, and also you see how the effect it's having on him. Then you see the love story between him and the woman to be his wife, and how she's actually a spy, and you always know it, but it doesn't play. It plays correct in the sense that it doesn't tell you in advance. Like, it knows you know, but you're just watching a drama of the reveal slowly. So you can watch the series in any order. This can go at the beginning of the film, before one, or it could go where it is, or it could go before finale, wherever you want to watch it. It's fine. But it's got it doesn't cheat and assume you know everything. It just lets the drama unfold. And you're just watching the consequences of these decisions made by people who made decisions under duress and under anger, and how the decisions start to haunt them slowly. Like, Kenshin's haunted by the decisions he made, killing this one person, which causes him to meet up with this woman who's out for revenge on him, who then falls from to realise he actually is a decent person. The situation is bad, and how this all spirals out and creates this war situation that turns Kenshin into a good guy, but also causes all this damage that will spread throughout the rest of the films. So it's a really complicated pulp masterpiece of a series. It's just wonderful, and you really feel for all the characters. You feel for the two different love interests of Kenshin. You feel for Kenshin, even though he's a bit pompous at times, but they take mickey out of that. I mean, his woe is me, I'm a total genius thing does get parodied and mocked at times. They don't let him, I mean, he's like, his friends don't let him get away with it. And you feel he sticks around these people also because they don't let him get away with it. You know, that's why the character's so likable, is a sense of, in the first one, he didn't know how to deal with his power in the beginning. But as the series goes on, he realises he has to ground himself and always be around the people and actually know what he's fighting for. And he becomes much more of a human character. And all the interactions are always, even though they're pulpy, they're always very moving and they just work so well. So this is a wonderful series. This is like 5 terrific films that you can easily rewatch. The fights are astonishing. Even though the beginning doesn't have that many fights, it has some good ones, but it's not the narrative focus. The narrative focus is the love story. But the fights are terrific though. When they happen really beautifully. But it knows it can't overdo it because it's about the love story. And the other ones, they can go much further because it's about the revenge for what the tragedy that originally happened in the beginning. So they can build and build and build. But it's just a series of great action, great drama, or great pulp drama. It is pulp, but it's wonderful pulp drama. It's done with genuineness. It really delivers. So the Rurouni Kenshin series is just beautiful. It's a wonderful series. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. And just go watch it. It's just wonderful. So I'll be back soon with another video. I hope you enjoyed this one. See you later.